Okay. Hey, students. We are having a wonderful special guest on this series of conversations with folks in marketing and design. My new friend from California, from Los Angeles specifically. This is Athena Liao. Liao. Got it. Yeah, I caught myself. I'm sorry. Athena Liao. She is the Senior Manager of Brand Strategy for Mastery of Fitness.
Mastery Fitness, yeah.
Okay. You can tell like I've been going through a lot of crisis communications today because I'm like just kind of burnout.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining us, and I really appreciate the time that you're giving to share your sort of wisdom and experiences with the students at Pitt and Point Park.
Yeah, of course.
So you're the Senior Manager of Brand Strategy, and you said you have a kind of an interesting story behind that. Before we get to that, I'm curious, how did you decide you wanted to get into marketing and brand strategy? Where are your roots, your humble beginnings? Where did they start?
Honestly, I didn't have aspirations to get into marketing. It kind of just happened, and
Okay.
I feel like that might be a story that's pretty common for a lot of people. Is, when I graduated college, personally, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at all, to be honest. So I just kind of went with the flow. And my first job out of college was I was an intern for like a sports and entertainment company. So they would put on events, and I was sort of just helping them with whatever they needed. And it just happened that that company was very small and had a lot of older people who worked there. And so because I was one of the youngest, they sort of automatically started giving me more things to do in terms of like digital technology. And so handling like the website or social media, it kind of just like got put on my plate.
Okay.
Even though I didn't really specifically want or ask to do that. So yeah, my beginnings kind of just, it sort of happened. And then as I learned more about the industry and realizing how big it truly was, I was able to explore a lot of different avenues within that. So like after I was doing sort of digital marketing for my first job, I've also worked on the advertising side, like media buying, media planning. And I worked at a social media agency. So agencies are, I would say, a pretty good entry level way to get into the marketing, but it is a very tough life. So I don't know if I necessarily recommend it.
Yeah.
And then after that, so I did, media planning and buying, and then sort of advertising in the publishing industry. And then after that, I went to business school, and now I'm leaning more on the brand management side. And I think one of the things I didn't realize coming into this was that when you say marketing, in my head, I thought that it just meant, oh, the ads that you run on campaigns that people see, and that was kind of it. Like the narrow definition of like marketing is that's what I thought. And then I was realizing more and more how it really is kind of a very broad spectrum that starts all the way from like building a brand is kind of like the beginning of it. But then it goes through, and then of course advertising and like marketing materials is part of it, but then it goes through all the way to like e-commerce strategy and like optimizing your funnel to get more conversions and like leads.
Right.
That also falls under the marketing person sometimes. So I think especially for students who are looking to get into the industry, there's so many different options that if you kind of just pick one of those things along that broad scale and find what is interesting to you, then you kind of can jump around and try a lot of different things. So yeah, I would say, because even sometimes for me, I'll be like annoyed when something that falls under my jurisdiction, because we already have so many responsibilities. And I'm like, oh, I wish like, I don't know, I wish the salespeople would handle this or something like that. Like, I think a lot of it is more and more marketing and sales is kind of
Right.
really coming together to become one unit. And in the past, they were very isolated and separate. And I feel like that caused a lot of inefficiencies within businesses. So, yeah.
So you said so many great things there. The first thing I want to focus on is you said you got a lot of this advertising social media experience before you went to school, and then when you were there, that augmented and grew and expanded. So you came in with some decent experience, and then you kind of blew up from there,
Yeah.
and you were able to ultimately enter at this higher level position. Which is exciting because I think that a lot of my students are thinking about their career trajectory and their growth plan. And that first job that they have, they may not necessarily see a lot of, they'll see a lot of skill development, but they'll also learn a lot about themselves with how they handle stress and, interpersonal relationships and things like that. But to your point, they'll also see the full spectrum of the marketing field and the industry itself. At which point they'll have the next several years to really hone in on an interest area.
Yeah.
And focus on that. And sales is such a critical interest area. And like you said, they are tied together. They are intrinsically tied together, much like how marketing and design are really tethered together as well. So I've been pushing a lot of students to focus on sales as skill development, and especially if they have a marketing background, or if you're a designer, really focus on building in that marketing piece, because it's all tied together.
Right.
And to your point, like, the more you know about the whole spectrum of things, the better professional and practitioner you're going to be.
Exactly.
So, and you may have said this because you just said like just a ton of awesome shit. So like, I'm trying to parse it out, but like, what were the interest areas that you decided to focus on within that marketing spectrum?
Yeah. So for me personally, I kind of always ignored the more sales side of the spectrum because I personally, just my personality, I always felt uncomfortable sort of either being pushy or, a lot of the traits that come with being a good salesperson, I feel like I didn't have. And so, and maybe part of it was just fear. Like, I'm sure if I practiced, I probably could be a good salesperson, but I sort of shied away from that side of it. Because for me, I sort of always want to be true to myself and be an authentic person. So like, I am a really good promoter of products that I really believe in. So
Sure.
I'll always sort of evangelize random things to my friends, just like, not that I'm getting paid for it or I'm not an ambassador, but like, so that's the type of sales that I'm good at, but that's not what kind of succeeds in a big company where you have like quotas and stuff.
Sure.
So I never really had experience or seeked out that side. And as I said, the digital marketing and social media side of things, I sort of fell into that. And then, I didn't love it, but it was great to have that experience, just as, everything's a basis for learning, right? So, and, since these days, social media landscapes are changing so quickly, like, it was great to learn it, but I think like the knowledge I gained may be slightly outdated now anyways.
Sure.
So I was really looking for something that was a little bit more stable in terms of, and that's one of the reasons why I went to business school too, is like, I learned a lot of things that will, stand the tests of time. And like, you learn about the Porter's 5 forces and all these things that have been taught for like years and
Right.
haven't changed at all, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to get a bigger picture of. And then
Sure.
once I took actually a brand management class, which I loved so much, and I had never done that in a professional sense before, so that's what I was able to pick, I guess, in terms of post-graduation. My path afterwards was in brand management. And so now this is the first time I'm doing that professionally, and it's very cool to be on the I guess beginning end of the marketing spectrum,
Right.
where the brand was sort of born, and I was able to help like create the story and the personality behind it, which was a lot of fun. So so I really liked that side, and I'm still pretty new in brand management in general. So I'll probably try to do this for a little longer still, and then I don't know, see what my next. Actually, I was going to mention potential next steps is I am actually interested in diving more into the creative director side of things, which is also very related to marketing, and like so. Because you mentioned the design aspect of things, and like I don't have a lot of professional experience there, but it's something that I would like to be more involved in the future, because I think a lot of disconnect. That's why I think everything's meshing together, is like previously when everyone was in silos, there would always be a lot of disconnect. So like we said, between sales and marketing, there would always be a lot of disconnect. And now that they're working together, it's better. And I think the same applies for design and marketing, where marketing professionals maybe in the past wouldn't necessarily understand like how to communicate what they want and have the vision for and so then that doesn't really help when you give a brief to someone who's in design and they're like, I don't really know what to do with this. So in my current job, I've actually started becoming more involved in the process of like making the creative for the campaigns, or like just organic like posts or whatever on digital platforms. And that's been really interesting for me to start to get into that more, because it is really all connected, and you don't like, if you've never worked in it, you don't realize how much work goes into it. So sometimes, I've seen marketing people be super ignorant about like, oh, can you just change this one thing, or like make these edits, and like they don't understand that there's a lot of effort that goes into making edits on certain creative. So like if you had just, if the plan was more clear from the beginning, then we could have got it right the first time, type of thing. And it just makes everything more streamlined. So all these different bubbles are sort of connecting into one, I think.
They're merging. And so one of the things that I like about what I like about brand management is that the person that's really ultimately managing the brand, or the team that is building the brand, they understand the heart and soul of it. They understand the identity completely. And you could actually make the argument that the identity is a composite of all of these personalities combined. And it lets you, it drives the creative, it drives communications, it drives sales. It's a system.
Right.
And the role of the brand manager is to understand that system and how all of these different interest areas can either positively or negatively affect that system. So you're the caretaker of this brand. And to your point, when people want to make changes to communications or designs and they don't totally understand the identity, then it's easy for them to make those changes because they're relatively careless, or at least they're not informed. And I deal with that constantly. So, I've started 4 different design companies. I'm on my 4th now. I sold the other 3, and so like the 4th one, it's all based on creative systems, not necessarily design, but creative systems. So what I do is I rebrand communities. So I come into a community that is dealing with either community engagement issues or economic development issues, and I develop a whole new branded platform for them. So here's what your logo looks like. Yeah, we've addressed the design aspect, but here's the heart and soul of the community. And here's how you communicate as a government to your people that live, work, play, learn, and thrive here. So taking that brand management strategy and applying it to a municipal government is a wild thing, but the two things that they have in common is that they're systems. And some systems are very compatible with one another, which makes the work fun. Now, for me, I chose to hone in on, so like design and marketing, the spectrum is so large. For me, I focused in on research-driven, data and analytics informed branding. So I would go into a community, and we would do surveys and focus groups and storytelling sessions, and essentially the people, the stakeholders of any given community, they would tell us what they want. So if we give a survey to 200 people and they all say, well, we want purple and orange as the colors for our community's logo, then damn it, we'll give them purple and orange, right? So the community essentially builds this brand themselves, and it's all based on data. So it's really kind of interesting from a scientific sort of aspect how you can take marketing even further. That's what interests me. And, to your point, like, you're building a system, you're caring for the brand. And do you think that now that you're managing this brand for your company and you're putting all of yourself into it, and do you think you'll have a hard time walking away from it eventually? Like, I built this thing, it's mine, it's me. You know what I mean?
No, actually, probably not, because the brand identity, like the brand personality that we concocted, is not based on me at all. Actually,
Sure.
And I sat down with my boss and we kind of discussed like because ultimately it is like the CEO's decision on what the brand is going to look like. So I think it's actually more maybe an emulation of him a little bit. But we did an exercise that was, like, if the brand were a person, what kind of attributes would it have? And we went through that exercise, and like it ended up being it's like maybe the values are things that I can stand behind, but the personality and the brand voice are not me. It's like, so whenever I'm doing communications, I kind of have to like get in the zone and kind of pretend like I'm someone else to channel it correctly. Otherwise, like, I've been called out sometimes where they're like, oh, can you edit how you worded this? Because it's very you, but it's it's very nice. But it doesn't really fit. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Like, sometimes I just forget,
Yeah. So yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because like there's a certain point where like, if so you architected a brand with your team, and it's based on the user profiles of your demographics and different target audiences and stuff like that. So there's a formula to it. There's a science behind it. So I'm glad that you employ those strategies, and it's not like a brand that just has aspects of you in it. I think being able to remove yourself and look at it from that objective point of view makes brands better, because they're built more strategically. But sometimes, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say,
please.
And I also think it's better if it's not yourself, because if I leave the company and a new person takes over brand management, they're not going to know what to do, because the personality is like gone, right? So I think it is good having it sort of be removed from yourself, because then, you have to put it in documentation and somehow put this all on paper so that you can pass it on to other employees in the future. So I think that it's better to not have the brand identity really be tied to necessarily the person who made it, because once they leave, you're kind of screwed, right? So
well, yeah, exactly. And I'm just finding this is of interest to me, because I'm finding that that's what's happening. Like, people aren't necessarily building their brands strategically. They're just kind of doing it organically, especially in the startup scene. I mean,
totally.
Practically all brands, not all brands, but so many brands in the startup scene, be it tech or whatever, they're just an extension of the personality of the founders.
Right.
And I get so frustrated with some startups because they're like, we can't penetrate, we can't break into the market, we're having such a hard time. I'm like, do you ever consider that you're kind of an asshole? And like, you know, like it takes and your company might be perceived that way. So, or like you're too much of an introvert, you're not speaking loud enough. And it's like, you have to separate your personality as the founder of a startup and build a fictitious profile and do it strategically. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
And I do enjoy calling some startup founders out on their shit there. But
I think also, especially with startups, now that you are talking about that, because I didn't bring this up, but I've co-founded a startup in the past too.
Okay.
And I totally agree with you. Sometimes it is just the founder's personality is emulated as the brand, but another thing I've noticed is a lot of startups, especially when they're younger, the founders are younger, they don't really understand or have learned about what branding really is or what it means to be a brand. And so I think I've found that it's difficult to convince them to sort of invest any money or time and effort into proper brand strategy or building it out in the beginning because they don't think it's important.
Right.
Or don't understand exactly what it is. And when you don't understand, you're like, okay, well, why am I going to spend my very like precious dollars towards this thing? So part of it is also maybe just education or lack thereof of how important it is. Like I'm the type of person who is a believer in like, you have to have the brand identity and personality and who you are and the values locked down first before pretty much doing anything else. At least, that is what I believe. And people might not agree, but I think coming from my previous like digital marketing background and then like the path that I went through with school, like this is sort of how I landed here. And so I'm, and I think eventually people do realize how important it is, but it's just difficult in the beginning to really want to invest or spend money on something like that.
All money goes towards product development.
Yeah.
Basically, because if you don't have a viable product, you don't have a company. I think that's sort of the running philosophy amongst not all, but many startups.
Right.
So yeah. So switching gears a little bit, what's a typical work day like for you? Give us some practical experience here. What's that like?
Okay, that question might not be great for me personally, for maybe in like other interviewees.
Sure.
Because I'm currently actually just on contract.
Okay.
So I was working full time with this company up until like a month or two ago, and now I'm I guess part time. So I'm just contracted to help them now with their brand management and marketing stuff.
Okay.
And then so I have actually been applying to full-time jobs recently, ever since I moved part-time. But with everything happening, like it hasn't really been looking good. So
right. Okay. So you may find yourself in a similar boat to that of my students. And in fairness to all involved, like this is a really relevant and topical issue. Like these are things that are happening now, and regardless of are you on contract because they've basically figured out what to do like on their own and you just kind of guide them through that, or are they feeling the hit of an economic collapse on the horizon?
It was a little bit of both. Once I had built everything out, I think it was easier. Like, I guess the salary, maybe like wasn't really warranted, and they were like, we can't really afford to keep you full time, and we kind of know what we're doing now, kind of thing.
Sure.
So they basically scaled back my responsibilities with them, which I totally, like, I get it. So because I was there to build it, and then kind of once it was built, they have sort of all the tools, I guess.
Right.
So I helped put the systems in place. It was kind of like you teach a man to fish and he can feed himself type of thing. So, so that's why I originally went onto part-time. And then now with everything that's happening, even if they did have more work for me, they probably wouldn't even be able to bring me back anyways. So it's been interesting. But one thing that I have been trying to do more is, especially since everyone is working remotely now, I've been trying to lean more into like independent marketing consulting, which is something I've never done before. But since at this point in my life now, I haven't counted, but probably 7 or 8 years of experience in marketing. So I've been trying to think about maybe going down that route and seeing if I can get any traction that way, because with companies, like a lot of them are on hiring freezes and like not even doing anything. So I've been trying to think about, if I can use my skill set and help in like a small way to like companies just as a temporary thing or something like that. I haven't really figured it out, but that's sort of how I'm trying to structure things right now, just because everything is so up in the air.
So, I think that you kind of inadvertently identified a need in respect to like what you're experiencing now with your position is what so many other people are going to experience if they aren't already.
Right.
And everyone's on quarantine. Everyone's locked down, right? I can't leave the house. There are people that can't leave their houses, can't go on site to their business or to their job. So what do you do instead? Well, like, I might not have a job to go to necessarily, some people might be thinking. So if left up to their own devices, they have to put food on the table, they have to make money for themselves. Maybe they do start their own companies. So so like if you pursue that independent marketing consultant aspect of things, like now all of a sudden you have like a large sort of growth and variety of different types of businesses that you can work with, which is exciting. Actually, if you think about it, talk about making lemonade out of lemons, right? So, I don't know what the LA scene looks like for that type of work. I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity. But is it crazy?
No, I just said, we'll see.
You'll see. Well, what I was actually going to recommend, if I could give you some unsolicited advice, is you could take advantage of remote work. Like, why can't you work with someone in Boston or Idaho, right? Because eventually, if what you're doing is you're building brands, it's like you raise this bird and then you set it free and it flies off on its own. Like, if that is your relationship to business and the services that you provide, then just do that, but like 1,000 times. Right. One of the folks that I interviewed, her name's Deanna Hins. She runs Sassy Girl Entrepreneur, and all she does is help folks like you just kind of find your footing and then mentor you through the process of starting a consultancy, and then you're kind of off and running. So I'll connect you guys together. I think you two would get along pretty well.
Sure. Thank you.
But yeah. So you kind of have an atypical day, which is totally fine. And you've been in the field for about, you said 7 or 8 years? Yeah. Okay. So what other kind of things interest you that you could do beyond just brand management? Like, you talked about like being able to grow into certain areas. What interests you?
So I mentioned it a little bit before, but definitely getting into the more creative side.
Yes. Thank you.
that was something I'm interested in, just because too, like, if I do eventually start my own company, not necessarily like a consultancy, but just a
Sure.
startup, since that's ultimately my passion is truly to be an entrepreneur. So if I do have my own company, then, you know, designers are expensive. So if I have some sort of skill, like maybe I won't design the thing myself, but if I have
Sure.
enough skills to where I can sort of get by to a certain level before I need to hand it over, I think that'll be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And like we mentioned, there is sometimes a lot of things that are lost in translation in terms of like portraying the brand in a certain way and stuff. And I think that if it's just all me and the same person, then that would make it a lot easier.
Yeah. So
So
creative direction, right?
yeah, like almost like production too. Like if there's like videos or something that I need to make in terms of like content creation, like
Mm-hmm.
that seems really fun to me, and it's a side of marketing that I've never done. Another thing is, and this is sort of not really related to marketing, but
Sure.
now that everyone's on quarantine, we've like, I'm sure you've seen too, like a lot of chatter about like, oh, what are you doing to like expand your skill set? So I've been thinking like for online classes or something, like maybe I can sign up to learn how to code, because that's something
Oh,
I
sure.
zero knowledge of, and it
Yeah.
just might be interesting, but yeah, I just think that that could be a really useful skill set, but we'll see how
Well,
that goes.
yeah, useful and complementary. So,
Right.
you've got the business and the marketing and brand management locked down. You could explore coding, you can explore design. Essentially what you're describing is the mythical unicorn, right? The mythical unicorn employee or professional that can do all of these different things, right?
Totally.
So for example, like, I'm a trained graphic designer. I have 3 degrees in design. I can write, I can do the marketing, I can do the branding, and I can code and build websites, and I can do sales and all of those things.
That's awesome.
And well, it didn't happen overnight. And like, I had to teach myself a lot of those things. So like learning online, especially in periods of downtime, that's like the best time to do it. Because when
Hmm.
else are you going to? Like when you have a job, you come home from the end
No,
at the end of the day, you're burnt out and tired. Yeah,
yeah,
no, it's not going to happen.
no, it's
So,
not.
yeah. It's interesting. I'm interested in seeing what other people that are in like maybe a similar position to you or I are doing in the startup space. Like what kind of collaborations could be had there. It'll be interesting to see how long this sort of lockdown lasts over. I
Right.
mean, over the long period of time, and see what kind of companies kind of spin out of it as a result.
Hmm.
People are making the jokes like, oh, 9 months from now, there will be a huge boom of babies, and the whole new generation is born before our eyes. It's like, yeah, okay, all right, whatever. That's the
I
same.
honestly didn't even think about that.
Oh, well, maybe I'm thinking about it because like I've got a 4-year-old, and all of my friends have young children, and
Mhm.
they're like, yeah, you laugh now, but wait until you've got a kid, 9 months from now.
Right.
But on an objective point of view, like maybe we are witnessing like the perhaps the birth of this next generation. You know what they're actually calling kids that are born now? I think they're calling them like boomlets. Have you
Boomlet?
heard that? Boomlets. Yeah. Have you heard this? It's
No,
ridiculous. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's a terrible name.
Millennials, and then zennials, and then boomlets. I don't
I
know
don't like that.
why. I don't know. I don't like it either. Uh,
But I think you're right. The next generation definitely, like I don't know if you saw this. There was some link that was floating around I saw on LinkedIn that was a speech from Bill Gates from 2015, and if you haven't seen it, I can send it to you. But he was
Please do.
giving a speech about like, oh, the next disaster that kills all the people on Earth, it's not going to be the next war. It's going to be an epidemic. And so like, it's crazy. Everyone was like, wow, he was totally right. And so I think like going forward, now that this is happening, the next generation is going to be raised to care about different things, which I love. And
God, I hope so.
like because let's be real, I feel like the world that we were living in before all this happened was like it was okay, but there was still a lot of problems. And I just always felt that people weren't necessarily valuing the right things. For example, me personally, like I really care a lot about the environment, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think that like coming out of this, people are gonna obviously care a lot more about preparedness for certain disasters like this, and like they're gonna care a lot more about investing in like proper health systems and things like
Right.
that, which I feel like were very neglected before.
Yeah.
And then hopefully they'll also still care about saving the planet too.
Right. Well, I think what this pandemic is proving is that how much we actually need the things that we say we need, but are being shot down because of the administration and other factors, right?
Right.
So, and you're starting to see it now in the startup culture. So for example, there's a company called Savvy. They're a B corporation. So there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be more of those too. Are you familiar with B Corps?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for those paying attention, a B Corp is a benefit corporation, and I liken that to being it's a for-profit company, but it hews as close to being a nonprofit in mission as you can get. So you don't have to prioritize profits over mission. You can kind of be balanced, and so Savvy is this B Corp that works with TIACREF, which is a retirement account brokerage firm. And they basically say, like, we exist because the problems related to student loan repayment hasn't been solved yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think their market position is like, or their mission, whatever, is we know that there's public service loan forgiveness, but the federal government is not really approving anyone for it. So we are going to make a company, and we're not only going to train you how to do it right, but we're going to manage your accounts for you. So that's kind of how they generate revenue.
Mm-hmm.
In so doing, at a certain point, their clientele will stop, because if they do their job right, their clientele will no longer have student loans to pay off.
Right.
Right. So you could take a similar model to that and apply it to practically anything: the environment, food deserts, any sort of human-centered challenge, even like recycling.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I don't know about you, but like they just stopped glass recycling in my community because,
Really?
glass recycling, because ultimately it's because China is not buying it, right?
Oh, I've heard about this. Right.
Yeah, it's because China's not buying it, but what they're staying stateside is the glass is too dirty.
Right.
Okay, well, what do we have to do to get someone to invent a technology that completely cleans glass?
Yeah.
Last I checked, we have the technology, right?
Right.
And I'm oversimplifying things, but just this experience that we're going through now, I think, to your point, people are going to be looking at the fine details. They're going to be looking at what they need and what we are actually capable of creating and serving, and creating those companies. And they won't necessarily be for profits; they'll be B corporations,
Right.
And that's kind of how it should be, in my opinion.
I agree. When you were saying like the definition of B Corp is that you don't have to put profits first, and like a lot of the focus is more on giving back and things like that, or purpose. Like profits meet purpose is always
right.
the battle. And like I feel like we're in the same boat, but like I think that every business shouldn't have to put profits first. Like even even if you're a for-profit business and you're not a B Corp. And like that's a trend that I've noticed is starting to gain a little bit of traction, is normal companies that are for-profit are starting to be more sort of aware of what they can do on the purpose side.
Right.
Which is really nice to see, but it should have been like that anyway,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But
yeah. It should have been that from the very beginning. And I think it was Tom Shoes that was the sort of leader in that conversion. I think Ben and Jerry's is also a either isn't,
Oh, I think
is a
so.
B, yeah, I think they're a B Corp. So like there's proof that there are a lot of companies out there that have the B Corp standard, and they're incredibly profitable. You
Mhm.
know, and the interesting thing about this is that B Corps aren't legal in all states, right?
Really?
Yeah, they are not recognized in Ohio, for
Oh, I didn't
example.
know that.
Yeah, so my company is, I'm in Pittsburgh. My company is Pennsylvania based. Pennsylvania recognizes B Corps, but my lawyers are in Ohio,
Oh.
right? So they're the ones that did all the incorporation paperwork. And
Uh-huh. They were
so,
like, "What's a B Corp? I don't understand."
yeah, they're like, we're going to have to get one of our attorneys that's licensed in Pennsylvania to do this. I'm like,
But
okay, fine, right? But, you know, it's interesting. So, like, I'm sure California recognizes B Corps. You can
yeah.
start one there, but Ohio doesn't. So you're going to see, like, if there's a growth in people that want to make B corporations, they may move out of the state and then damage the state's economic capabilities
Right.
because they won't recognize this business entity type
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really do anything. It's just an LLC. You know,
Right.
I don't even think that there's IRS, necessarily IRS obligations other than just paying your taxes like you would a regular company.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the fact that B Corp is a marketable aspect. And
Yeah.
because it's marketable, it holds a company to actually walking the walk and talking the talk, you know,
Yeah.
especially when they're human centered. My fourth company, Plus Public, is a B corporation.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so we're rebranding these companies, and then rebranding these communities, and then we're also giving back additional value through donations or whatever. But at any rate, we're running low on time, so I wanted to ask you, for my marketing and design students that are getting ready to graduate, what advice do you have for them?
I'll have to think carefully about this because I feel like, given the current economic situation,
Okay.
it's going to be difficult. But um,
What if I rephrase a question? What are things you wanted to hear when you were ready to graduate?
from college, to be honest, I think the focus really, no matter what's happening in the world, the most valuable thing that I found is truly, like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of 20 something year olds don't spend enough time on focusing on yourself and like inner reflection. So what I found that helped a lot for me over the years is um, like really learning about what I like to do or what I find challenging, how I does my personality react a certain way to stress compared differently compared to other people, and like, you know, especially when you can't choose who your coworkers are, there's always going to be inter-office like politics or drama maybe, and it's difficult to navigate different types of people and things like that. And I feel like more than what your role, your title ends up being, because the thing that's consistent across being a professional is like the work that you do is always going to probably be around other people, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that I didn't really know what I wanted to do after graduation, and so you guys are already like a step above me from there. But I think that what was really underrated was the self exploration and like really like taking time to think about you know how how you're going to react in certain situations. And communication too is another thing that I think is underrated. Is once you enter the workforce, it's a whole another beast of, it's like you can't really talk like you're just talking to your friends. And
Right.
so yeah, I think it's self-reflection and just really truly finding things that you enjoy or don't enjoy, and that can help sort of form your path, has been helpful. I don't know if that's a good answer, but
No, and it's a great answer, and it's not the first time I've heard that, which means it's really important. Again, like I'm going to have students that are just going to try to find like an entry level job and try to be satisfied with that. And ultimately, like an entry level job, it's like, you're not going to be there for 30 years. You're not going to be your
Right.
parents because you have so many more opportunities ahead of you. On top of the fact that if you're introspective and you listen to yourself and really take another look or a different angle on what you're experiencing on the daily, you're going to make a better career and life for yourself. And it really starts with what makes you happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I feel like it
Yeah.
took me a long time to realize that, but truly, I'm now at the point where I realized that I could honestly get any job doing anything, and what matters more to me is like you really need to find what you're passionate about, and if you care about the company or like align with the values, I could be picking tomatoes on a tomato farm, like I don't really care, and as long as like there's a good mix, like maybe I don't care about the values as much, but maybe the people I work with are amazing, or like it's a great company culture and things like
Right.
that. So you really just have to weigh what matters the most to you. And I think that really the job function or job description is the less important thing. And, even if it ends up being a job that maybe you don't end up picking tomatoes and you're like, I hate this, but everything in life is a learning experience. And so the positive that comes out of it is now you've learned from this job that maybe you didn't like, and you can apply that going forward to whatever potential next job. So I'm always in the mindset nowadays where there isn't really a negative, like how you define negative is up to you, right? So if something happens, it's kind of in your own mindset to be able to frame it as a positive. And so if something happens that you dislike, then you can always say, well, at least from this that I've learned a lot of other things or have a lot of takeaways in my arsenal now. So
Absolutely. Glass half full.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and end it there. If my students are interested in learning more about you or reaching out, what do you want to hype? What do you want to promote? Anything? How can they get a hold of you or learn more about what you're doing? LinkedIn?
You can give them, you have my email address now, right?
Yes.
You can give them that. I don't mind.
Cool. Okay.
And then I guess if they want to see other stuff that I worked on, I can send you my LinkedIn page.
Okay.
And
great.
they can look there.
Well, thank you, Athena. I really appreciate your time. This was great. And enjoy the rest of your night, and I'll stop the recording.
Okay.